Hey guys, it's Katie. I'm going to be doing a book talk on Hollow City by Ransom Riggs, which is the second novel of Miss Peregrine's Peculiar Children series. I got sent this book from Quirk for an honest review, and an honest review is what I will give it. For starters, I have to warn you that this will have spoilers for the first book because of the fact that this is the second book in a series, therefore it's going to relate in some way to the first book. So if you haven't read Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, then I suggest that you read that and then come back to this video. Anyways, this book starts off where it finishes and Miss Peregrine is still stuck as a bird and can't seem to transform back into her former self. So the children are off on a journey to try and find one of the other Imberns, bird people, bird women. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it, but let's just say Imberns. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. The children are off to find another Imburn that hasn't been captured by the whites in order to make her human again, and they have to go through all of these trials and tribulations and meet all these different people and all these different peculiars, and it's absolutely wonderful to read. It definitely is more plot driven than the first book. The first book I felt was more character development and world building, and that's all good and well for a first book because of the fact that it's drawing you into the world. It's making it irresistible to you. It makes you want to read more, and I love that about the first book. It was also very new with the photographs and the descriptions and the fact that I'd never read anything like that before. It was something different and something original, and I just thought it was very refreshing to read. Whereas this book was more plot orientated in the way that they were going on a journey to find a cure for Miss Peregrine, and it did test them. It tested the children, and that testing showed the development in the characters, and you could see that in the way that they presented themselves and the way that they grew throughout their journey. They'd come up against hollows and whites and all different kinds of tortures. Anything like that is just going to make you grow, and it was wonderful to read about that development in Ransom Riggs' writing. I know I mentioned the photos before, and I do still love the photos, but I feel as though the effect of the photos with the story has kind of run out in this book. There is actually a little section after the book is finished that says about the photography, and it tells you that he has gone around flea markets and vintage paper shows, and he's bought them off of people that have just had them in their houses. And although the majority of them are genuine, some of them have actually been manipulated. I thought it was really ingenious to have those in the first book because it was something that I hadn't seen before. I'd never seen those kind of peculiar photos revolving around a story. In the first book I felt as though the photos added a genuine touch to it. It made the story seem more real to actually see photographs of what Ransom Riggs is actually describing, but I felt as though in Hollow City it kind of lost its appeal and wasn't as refreshing as it was in the first book. To me it just felt as though Ransom Riggs had been given a bunch of photos and told to make the most outlandish story out of those photos, rather than in the first book it felt as though those stories related to the story and made it seem more real. It just seemed a little bit more fake and a little bit more forced in Hollow City. Towards the end of the book, however, I really did enjoy looking at the photography, and especially when you started to meet more peculiars, you started to see what they all looked like and things like that. But at the beginning, as I said, it seemed to be all scenery and the places that they were going rather than the photographs that they were picking up and the people that they were meeting, and I just didn't enjoy seeing those photos. I thought they were quite boring and bland, and it just wasn't something that stimulated me to read on. With regards to the boring and bland photos, I feel this actually did tie in with the beginning of the book because I felt myself forcing myself to carry on reading it up to about 100 pages. They hadn't really got anywhere, and it seemed as though they were going around in circles. It was quite slow to start with, and I think that's what did put me off a little bit because of the fact that it did seem a little bit forced. It did seem as though he was making a story around these pictures rather than the other way round, and I wasn't really intrigued by the storyline at the beginning. At the beginning of the book they meet their first bunch of peculiars, and although I'm not going to explain what they were just so outlandish that I just thought it sounded really stupid. I thought it was really so far-fetched. I mean, I know this is a fantasy novel and they're all peculiar, but it was just taking peculiar to another level, and I didn't think that it was necessary. Anyone who's read the book won't necessarily agree, but you will know the part that I'm talking about. I just felt as though that let it down, and it seemed as though it was too forced for my likings. As I said, towards the end it did get so much more better. It was action packed and things were jumping out everywhere. Things were happening left, right and centre, and it started to get really fantastic, and the ending was just building and building and building until the massive climax. And the plot twist at the end, guys, just that. I have no words. It was absolutely amazing, and it's one of those plot twists that makes you want to reread the book and go back to the beginning and think, how on earth did I miss that in the first place? It's just one of those things that really shocks you, and I like the fact that when you actually find out about it, the characters are even looking back at what happened and describing what happened and kind of fitting all the jigsaw puzzle pieces together, and I thought it was fantastic to see that kind of thought in a character. But I have to admit that although I did think that this was a really good book, I didn't think it compared to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, the first book. I felt as though it did slip a little bit, and this kind of goes into my idea of thinking that all second books go into this state of second book syndrome, which I like to call when the second book generally isn't as good as the first book. It was still an enjoyable read, and I'm still really looking forward to the third book, but it wasn't really my cup of tea, to be honest. Anyways, have you guys read the book at all? Please let me know what your thoughts are, and if you have any kind of opposing opinions to mine, I'd love to start a discussion down in the comments below with you guys. So I will speak to you in my next video. Bye!